Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with this whole tape situation. Obviously, the investigation heats up even more when Brett calls up Betty in the middle of the night. Hey, get me transferred to a different prison. The fact of the matter is, I'll hook you up with some information, some juicy information that's going to change the tides of all of this investigation. And then lo and behold, Brett ends up dead. It's like, well, and his eyes were scooped out. And then it's just like, it must have been David. You could tell immediately something was definitely off because Charles kept putting everything. Was like, yep. Well, he was so intent on like making it seem like it was all closed and shut. So it's like that should have been like suspicion number one. Or just like, I mean, granted, I've already been suspicious of him already, but that was just, but then, because even when the investigation progressed, they end up finding David later on, but he's hung, and it's just like, the sign God is watching us on it too, so you're like, okay, so even Betty being like, this doesn't sit right, it's a little too neat, like all it's like, well, I guess it really is him. But then like you have Donna, which I wasn't expecting that, calling her up later, being like, you need to help me. First it was Brett, then it was Joan, and now it's me. I need you to help me. Which obviously Betty's like, no, I'm not going to get caught up in your psychodrama. You remember when you tried to kill my boyfriend with a rocket bashed against it? Yeah, screw you. But then later on finds out, Joan got murdered in the exact same way they tried to kill Jughead. So it's like, so now it's just like, okay, so it wasn't David behind the whole being the auteur thing, so there's still someone else out there with all of this. And then they also get the tape of the house. It's like, whoa, whoever it was inside the house. We got to get out of here. And so the entire family packs up and moves into like a hotel or something. But thinking about it being like, all right, so David wasn't the one responsible. But then they think about the tape and everything. And they're like, well, whoever it was has to have good enough knowledge about us and everything, about the investigation. But then like Betty starts thinking, well, what if it's, and then you have Jughead be like, no, it couldn't be. And it's like, well, they're starting to suspect Charles. It's like, well, he has been investigating. Like he would also have the resources both inside and outside to get both Brett and Joan. And then it's like, okay, so they have to check on something. So they go and look in the house and end up finding all his bugs, and they end up confronting him, which he doesn't fight it too much. Because my initial thought was that obviously when they introduced the whole Charles and Chick storyline, I was like, okay, so they're most likely like planning some grand scheme revenge against Betty and Jughead, in particular Betty. I thought that's where it was. I mean, because it's also probably like, well, you did try to feed Chick to your dad, so I think maybe that's where that was coming from. So I think everything he did was kind of a little bit of revenge, but it's also, I think, part of him enjoyed the cat and mouse game of it, because I guess it was almost like me and Chick versus you and Jughead. Let's see who comes out, like whether you'll kind of be able to see me for who I really am, because neither one, Jughead nor Betty, were able to see him for who he was, because it's like, hey, this lost brother, especially because they had the whole Chick situation of him pretending to be their brother, and they had the real Charles and him being this FBI agent, and considering what they kind of get up to, it was just kind of a match made in heaven. So they saw him as this one way, so they didn't, I guess it never really crossed their mind to think like, hey, like there might be something sinister here, especially in Betty's case, because it's like, well, we have that serial killer gene in our family, but it's like he's doing something good. He's, taking it and using it as a cop and everything, which I think is such an interesting thing. When you actually think about it, he did admit like, oh, I have the serial killer gene, but for him, he did say like doing all this cop work actually helped him in the end, because that's how he kind of dealt with it. And it's just interesting. I wasn't expecting the reveal to be like, oh yeah, I'm basically Dexter, that I only kill bad people. That's how he handles his serial killer gene. I mean, let's not forget Dexter was also like a God. What would I always forget what Dexter's job is called? Like he's he deals with the blood and stuff like that, the crime scenes and stuff like that, or just like the crime scene in general. I always forget what his actual job title is, but obviously Charles being an actual FBI agent, it's just interesting. And him just, like I said, not even fighting. It's like, yep, you caught me. It's like he enjoyed the game to a certain extent. It's like, well, that's also how Brett ended up dead, because Chick ended up killing him inside, and obviously made it a little easier. Didn't have to pull too many strings to make that happen. It's like the only reason why you didn't kill Donna is because she managed to slip away, which is kind of sad. Like, Donna's like the head honcho of everything, so she managed to get away while everyone else kind of ended up dying. Granted, they're just as responsible. It is that thing of like, it's kind of like that Dexter thing of where you're like, it's not right, but it's not like these were people who were good people. So it's that complicated thing. But then at the end of the day, it's like, all right, you're the auteur, you're the one behind all the tapes. It's like, yeah, nah, that was me. Oh yeah, I killed, David, because he was a piece of crap human being. All the blue velvets. Yeah, he was a terrible person. Yeah, I killed him. But yeah, all that other stuff, the tapes, that's not me. And it's like, but he knows who it is. But he's like, oh, why would I want to take that shine away from you, baby brother? You and sis figuring it out, So that was interesting. But then they were like, all right, well, it seemed like it fits. Charles being the auteur, it seemed like it fit perfectly too. It's like, I mean, who else would, be able to do that? And then it hits Jughead. And he's like, it figures it out. I was like, wait. And then he confronts Jelly Bean about it. I was like, I knew it. I've been saying something about Jelly Bean's been rubbing me the wrong way. And for her to be behind the tapes. It was interesting finding out why she was behind the tapes. I mean, granted, they kind of hint to this earlier. I didn't notice it before, but I definitely noticed it this episode when, Jughead's like, oh, I got accepted into Iowa. She's looking a little sad. I didn't think too much of it. I knew there was something up with it, but I didn't think and correlate that those two things were, I guess synonymous would be kind of the right word, that those two things would be connected in that regard, Because I immediately was like, okay, so Jelly Bean must have done this because what's the best way to keep your brother here? Someone who's entertained by a mystery. Why not create like this mystery, just this creepy thing that they kind of, it makes him a little unsettled because it's like, hey, I got to stay behind because, my family's potentially being threatened. So is my friend. So it's like, I got to stick this out, figure this out. But it escalated from there because it was no longer just about, being creepy. So they recreated all this stuff because apparently, like I said, Jelly Bean was at that party last episode. And I was like, she said a friend dragged me along. I'm like, I don't know, man. It's like, is that really the case? And it turns out she was hanging out with that kid, Ricky, from the G&G games and stuff like that whole thing. So it's interesting to see that this is something that hasn't slowly built up. And so to find out, at first it was just about kind of keeping Jughead there, which it still kind of was, but eventually they escalated because it's like, we weren't getting the same thrills. It seems like she's the one that suggested it, so they went bigger and bigger, recreating these murders and stuff like that, which is super effed up considering, hey, one of those murders was your brother's murder. I guess that attempted murder. Then all this terrible stuff. Basically, what they did sent Archie into a spiral this episode. We'll get to that, but it's like, man, that's messed up. And even Jughead being like, he doesn't think she really realizes how messed up that is. What are they going to do about that? Literally at the same time, Alice is dealing with the whole Charles situation. They got to deal with this too. I mean, it showed you how messed up both those families are. It's not just Betty's family that's messed up. Jughead's is in his own right because for Jelly Bean, she's gotten to know her brother again after so long, and it was, he was going off to college, and she missed that, she missed him, they reconnected after all this, and once again, I'm sure, hey, I think I even brought this up last episode, I'm sure, all the shit she got up to with, her mom and everything, not the most well-adjusted, normal kid. I mean, granted, coming to Riverdale, no one's going to be well-adjusted, so, but it was just like, man, I mean, because I just had a feeling it was Jelly Bean and also to find out it was other kids about her age too, but I had a feeling Jelly Bean was involved, but just, wow. I would just never knew in one fell swoop. We knocked out the Charles mystery, we knocked out the tape mystery, so that's done for now. Wow. That's just wow. So I'm really curious to see how they handle that. Are they going to, send Jelly Bean to therapy? Because obviously she needs it. There's definitely there's some stuff there because once again, she's not realizing kind of how wrong and messed up it was. It's almost like she realizes it's wrong now because she got caught, but it's just the fact that she kept going, that's just the thing. So we'll see where that storyline ends up going. Another storyline in this episode is the whole Cheryl situation. Obviously, it's kind of interesting. Both Cheryl and Archie are kind of on edge this episode. She's chewing the lady out because the gowns are blue instead of red they're supposed to be. And for her, it's just because she's dealing with the whole Tony thing. Tony's like, I'm going to try and talk to my Nana to kind of fix this whole situation. And Cheryl's trying to handle that on her own front. She's trying to like reconnect with the family, talk to the other members of the family, because she wants to sell a portion of their land, so the Blossom land, so they can like pay back the families that they've kind of taken land from, in particular Tony's family, but just in general. The rest of the family doesn't want to do it just because, well, they're Blossoms and they don't want to help anyone, but also it's just like retribution for you killing, wasn't it like their cousin that they were mentioning that Cheryl killed last season. So it's like, yeah, it's more so that too. So she goes to her mom, and her mom's like, well, they're always just kind of looking out for themselves, those cowards. So it's like, all right, you and Tony go on a vacation. You need an alibi. And it turns out she poisoned said members of the family. And it's like, oh, now the entire business is up to you, which is like, in a twisted way, that was her mom being sweet, which is interesting considering like the very complicated relationship Cheryl has always had with her mom. And it was almost kind of like, hey, and it's just like, once again, just how okay with you. I mean, I guess that's Cheryl. She's kind of okay getting what she wants by any means. So it's like, well, I'll be able to do what I want to with everything. So thanks, Momsy, and it's like, you're just a little too okay with your mom just murdering the rest of your family. I mean, I guess it's like, well, it's a family I don't give a shit about. They didn't do what I said. So it's just like, it's just a little that thing of like, it's kind of effed up that you're just kind of okay with them being murdered and just kind of being okay with it. I mean, I guess it's like, well, Momsy's a murderer and she does terrible stuff, but when it benefits me, it's okay. That's just like the backwards messaging it seems like we're getting in that regard. So that was fascinating in its own right. Then you had Veronica, who's, telling Archie, oh, let's pretend like we're still dating and stuff. I don't want any drama. But for Archie, it's all happening at the wrong time because he's dealing with what he's dealing with, but he doesn't confide in Betty, Jughead, or Veronica. So he's kind of dealing with that all on his own, and he kind of blows up at Veronica. He's like, you want to pretend to do all that? Fine. Because she's like still pretending like they're dating, kissing and stuff like that. Because it's like, if people find out we broke up, then they're going to start asking questions, and that's eventually going to lead to you and Betty. And it's like, I don't want to do that. So let's just keep this up for like the next week or so until we graduate. And then we can end the charade, But at the same time, she's dealing with her dad, who ended up attacking Archie. Once again, wrong time. That could have escalated and gone terrible, especially considering the fact that you're not in the best condition right now, and Archie's, in his prime, and he already kind of whooped your ass before. Even more so in this situation, probably could have been worse considering like him being like full on raged up right now. So, but for her and her sister Hermosa, well, for one, she is about to get attacked because, her dad's up to his shenanigans of killing people, and now, like, he's gotten sloppy, and because of that, the rest of the family's gonna suffer. And Hermosa pops them like it's nothing. It's like, well, it was self-defense, right? I'm like, how did we just sweep that on the rug? To be fair, it's the largest. They could sweep that under the rug. It's like, obviously the family's got the criminal ties. The criminal blood kind of runs through the family a little bit. So I don't know whether Hermosa was like, I'm going to send some people to get rid of the bodies, because I'm sure you didn't call that in, because it's like, well, the moment they found out, like, oh, these are daddy's enemies. All right. So what we're going to do is we'll talk to mom. Well, I said mom, but obviously that's just Veronica's mom, not Hermosa's mom. But it's like, yeah, we're going to take dad down. We kind of force him to retire. And it's like, she was all about that plan. And it's like, well, what can I do to help? So they confront him to make him say, like, back down. They're going to take over the family business and stuff like that. And he was like, no, my own blood kind of coming at me like this. He's like, no, like fighting and kill. He's like, all I need are my fist and a gun, and I'm fighting this. And Veronica's like, there's no scientific evidence that like you fighting and hurting people is making you feel better, But for him, he's like, get out. He's kind of rage-filled about it. And obviously, Hermosa was like, well, we got to go to more extremes. It needs to be the 1-2 punch. Granted, at the end of the day, it ended up being a 1-2-3 punch. But it's like, oh, I sent some people to rough daddy up really badly. And Veronica, usually being there kind of to be the one he kind of leans on, it's like, yeah, no. You want to make it seem like you're a scorpion because you're a Scorpio. But it's like, you're more like a doll. It's like, I don't want you keep going down this route. You are eventually going to die in the street. Your blood bleeding into the gutters. Like, if you don't stop this. So how about now, like the dog you are, lick your own wounds, so you have a choice with this. And he's like, all right, I don't like it, but I will retire. I'll go away for a little bit. How do you want to go with me? It's like, no. actually, I'm done because we're getting a divorce because I'm going to be a real housewife because I was offered a chance before, but it's like now in retrospect, she's like, the reason why I went along with all this to begin with just was to make sure that Veronica was okay. And now I don't have to worry about it. She's going off to college and Hermosa's going to be the one taking care of the business. So it's like, it's all covered. So I don't need to stick around anymore. It's time for me to do me. It's time for me to not have to stifle my own ambitions because of you. So... Because that was always the thing of, like, why she just so nonchalantly, like, went back. Obviously, that took Fred caught Fred off guard, considering everything that was going on between them. But it was a situation of she was doing that all for Veronica's sake. So I guess going along with everything he did, the criminal stuff, she went along with it because it's also like, well, need to keep him placated. We need to keep him happy and stuffed and big-bellied and happy. And now that Veronica's going off and now he's kind of in a weakened state, it's kind of like, I'm going to go off and do me. So we're getting a divorce. And he just kind of had to shrug it off and just kind of like, And this one moment, every woman in his life just turned on him just like that. So we'll see. Now, that does kind of put Hermosa as like, it shows that she's very ambitious. Like, that's the only reason why it's like, I don't really give a shit about Dad. Now I get the, I got the keys to the castle, So she's kind of top dog now. Granted, I doubt all those enemies are just going to disappear. I'm sure that's still going to be an element they have to deal with. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that ends up playing out. But focusing on the other aspect to this episode was the Archie thing. And speaking of the whole Fred and Hermione situation, was you had Hiram, jeez, I'm blanking on names sometimes during these recordings. Hiram throwing at his face, being basically like, oh, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Him basically reliving that situation because Archie blames himself over and over again about the whole Black Hood thing because it's like, he got shot because I was a coward, I was weak. Like, it's not the best time to be throwing shade at his dad. Because even Archie being like, going to his dad's grave, it's like, this is messed up. Like, you always put this town first. And now this town is besmirching your name. Because it's not only Hiram that was doing. I think he actually visited his dad's grave before Hiram even said that. I think that was beforehand. So, but still, it added more salt to the wound. And even Hiram was almost caught off guard by like how angry Archie was getting, and I was like, oh, I guess he kind of recognized, oh, there might be something else going on here, because it's like, oh, how can you break my daughter's heart? Because he wasn't like, I'm sorry, Mr. Locke. He was just like, get out. Like it was different. I think it was a reaction he wasn't expecting from Archie, Because obviously, like, this is just one of those... Because let's not forget what spiral the Black Hood thing set Archie down. Like, he went full vigilante, like, he was rage-filled. And, like, I mean, obviously, that's always been... especially... I mean, because that's always been Archie's outlet when the trauma. Like, he's been through so much, and every time something really traumatic happens to him, what does he do? He gets very rage-filled because he doesn't properly deal with his emotions. I mean, it's a complex thing. It's not like it's an easy, like, 1-2 solution. It's like, no, it's, even later on, his uncle says it's like something that's going to take a while. Maybe even be something you battle your entire lifetime, So that's the thing. So, obviously, like I said, it's sending him spiraling a little bit, especially when you add on top of, like, oh, yeah, like, the dad of the kid who ran over Fred is like, the dad's like, well, I'm about to go to court, and a letter from the family, or at least the family speaking more positively on me, will look better for me at the end of the day. And even then, Archie was struggling, having to like write something, and then on top of thinking about the tape, thinking about his dad in general, it just, it set him off. And it gets even more complicated when the dad comes in. It's like, hey, my son actually confessed. And it's like, you coming to Jeffrey's defense could be the difference between months or years of him in prison. But it's like that, what Jeffrey did, I get it. He was scared. That's hitting my dad's one thing. Leaving him is another. My dad would never do that. Like hitting someone, that's something I could have done. But leaving someone, I would never have done that. And for Archie, that's the thing of like, my dad's gone now because of him. Like, who knows what could have happened if he had gotten help ahead of time. Like, who knows because of what your son did. He took my dad away from me. And just Archie's so filled with pain and anger, especially when his mom sees the tape and he was like, I was weak, and dad got her. She's like, no, honey, like, we need to give this tape to like the cops, or we give this to Betty and Jughead. But he was like, no one's going to watch this tape, because for him, it's a reminder of how weak he was. It was a reminder of like, I wasn't, because I'm sure he correlates to too, I wasn't there for my dad there. I couldn't help him then, and I can't help him when he got hit. He was alone, and it's just like, he breaks the tape because he doesn't want anyone to see. You know, it reminds him of his shame. He smashes the TV. Luckily, his Uncle Frank was there, like, oh, you're angry. You got to deal with that anger. Come on, hit me. You know you want to. And he slugs his uncle a couple times. And he's just like, you got to let that anger go, son. And it's just like Archie just collapsing, just because it's just like, he just needed it out. Like, he was just so angry, especially because he was bottling it up. He had no one to turn to. Him and Veronica being in their complicated thing just added more to it, where it's like, I can't rely on Veronica. We're up there pretending to be close when we're not. And I'm sure, like, everything is just like, everything's going wrong. It's like, oh, I'm not graduating with my friends. It's just like, he was so focused on the negative. So he was just so angry. And I can get that, like, being consumed by your anger, that all he sees is red, no pun intended. But, yeah, and his uncle being there, and it's like, his uncle saying, like, I'm going to turn myself in for all the stuff I did in my past, you know, and, you know, Archie's mom going to be his representative, and it changed a lot for Archie. He was able to, he even wrote the letter at the end of the day, you know, and I even like, you know, him and Frank visiting the grave at the end, because it's, at the end of the day, for him, it's like, my dad was never that eye for an eye type of person. And it's like, my dad was all about second chances. So don't, like, completely throw Jeffrey's life away. Like, give him a second chance, you know? So I thought that was a powerful message. Obviously, you know, a reminder, just, you know, Fred, you know, keeping who Fred Andrews was alive, like that part of Archie, because he's like, I, you know, made a promise after my dad died to always, you know, be better and better and do better and continue to keep his legacy alive and, you know, make him proud. So keeping that side of him. I'm curious now that he's kind of dealt with this. Granted, once again, it's not going to be an easy, like, oh, it's over and done with. It's going to be a continuous thing. It's been a continuous thing over the course of the series of just that being something he's dealt with. So I am curious to see what this means in the long run. Obviously, graduation is like right around the corner. I think this show's typically like 22 episode seasons. So like episode 19 was the season finale, like Charmed was, I believe. So the premiere was like episode 20 of season 4. This is 21. So the next episode would have been the official season finale, I believe. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how they end up wrapping it up. Because like I said, I thought I remember hearing that there was going to be a time skip here. It probably would be. And I'm curious to see what that kind of looks like. Because once again, we're at the point where like everything's resolved to a certain extent. Obviously, it's just more character stories of coming to their conclusions and what this means in the grand scheme of things. Where the next chapter of every character story, like, you know, they're going to end it off with like, oh, there's going to be something else. But currently speaking, everything's kind of resolved. All they have to look forward to is a graduation. So I think that's going to be a big focus on its own right and what the next chapter of everyone's lives look like. And, you know, I'm curious to see what that, once again, it's that thing of, hey, like, these are only like the first few episodes of the season, so it's like, how is the rest of the season going to flow? What's that going to look like? You know, once again, it's that question of how much has changed in between the seasons. Like, you know, having to write this as part of season 5 instead of the end of season 4. Or like, what's that mean, you know, for the flow for the rest of the season? You know, I'm curious about that. Like I said, not just for this show, for a lot of shows. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.